Hello, you're listening to A Hero's Welcome, episode 19. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Wes. I'm here with Andrew.
And as usual, we got a lot of stuff going on in Overwatch, a lot of fun stuff. I know I'm super excited. Can't wait for Season 2. How are you feeling? You ready for Season 2?
I'm waiting for Season 2. Yes, the PTR is a pretty cool place to hang out, though.
I've been having a lot of fun with PTR, a lot of changes even more recently. There's been some new updates to PTR. We're going to talk about that later. It's some cool stuff going on there. I've been having a ton of fun playing Hanzo now, even playing some Genji, even after the changes.
Yeah, PTR is fun, but, we like to see the seasons probably start a little bit sooner. But, we'll talk a little bit about that. We're talking about Reinhardt today in our strategy segment.
The German power. We're talking about Reinhardt. We got some a whole new map, Eichenwald. We're going to talk a lot about that and some PTR changes for sure.
Yeah, and a little bit of coverage in the competitive as well. So let's get started. To begin off, you talked about Eichenwald, so we're able to play on the PTR now.
Right,
how you liking
so
it?
I got a chance to get in there. There's actually a brawl specifically for it. If you guys want to check it out, you can get on into the PTR and go into the brawl, and it's all just Eichenwald all day long. It looks really amazing. It's a really nice map. It's really designed very well. I mean, as we know, Overwatch, they've done a great job with all the maps, but this is a totally different map. We say that a lot, but this is the layout, the design of it. It totally feels like a different map. It reminds me of a lot of other maps in certain other games where things are a lot more closer together. You got a lot more narrow spaces and a bunch of different ways and routes that you can take. There's a huge amount of verticality, which is awesome for me. I love playing that game with Genji and having fun with the verticality. So
yeah, the map visually looks very, very attractive. And yeah, I think it is a bit of a different beast. I think the map, it just seems it fits with Overwatch theme, but it definitely seems like it's different than the other ones.
Right. It seems like it's a totally different area. Like it came from a different era in time, almost. Like it's very interesting. So if you haven't checked it out, get on into PTR and check out Eichenwald. I'm sure you'll have a ton of fun with it, like we've been having.
Yes, and just some other little news. I'm sure if you've been on the subreddits or the forum boards, you've heard a lot about Sombra. So pretty much if you've never left the game and just been playing it 24/7, Blizzard has been releasing these hints about this Sombra character, and they've been kind of teasing us for quite a while. They probably have quite a while more of teasing us.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've been doing this for quite a while, and a lot of people like myself, you check in every once in a while, but they're just in full mode of just messing with us constantly. So they're having a lot of fun with it. I love it. I mean, it's cool to see that they're having some fun with the game and just kind of throwing hints out there, but I mean, if you check out the Reddit forum or not, there's plenty of stuff to look into.
Yeah, we'll try to have a link. Obviously, it's tons of things to cover, and people are literally losing their minds over this. I mean, she has a dedicated website. We've had all these, breaking of codes, and we have these multiple skulls that we derive from these hex codes, and we took these images and we lined this up, and there's 26 or 27 letters in the alphabet, and it spells out this with the heartbeat thump and blah blah. I mean,
yeah. So the Reddit army is in full effect trying to figure this stuff out. But I mean, as you can imagine, Blizzard's just giving us teasers and hints. They have not really given us anything substantial. So definitely looking forward to more information with that, and we'll keep you updated if we find anything out.
Right, so let's talk about the PTR. Some changes, obviously, since last week we've been covering. So first off, let's talk about the quick melee changes. There's some changes in melee.
Right. So, if you play Genji like I do a lot, you'll definitely notice quite a bit of change. So the quick melee change, basically standard now, they want to make it to where the melee abilities are not interrupting your actual regular baseline abilities, and the abilities are not interrupting your melee and vice versa. So they've changed the way it works, basically, unless it's a quick movement ability or like an ultimate. You are not able to interrupt abilities with your quick melee, and your abilities are not able to interrupt their quick melee as well.
Yeah, it's important to note that we're talking about PTR, current,
the current build with PTR, anything could change.
Anything could
change. Getting
change.
information, and it probably will change before things end. But I think it's a really good addition. I'm happy that they did it. I think it really makes you think dynamically about the way in which you're using abilities. You only have a few abilities in Overwatch, so it's very important that we kind of line these things up and make it really interesting to use.
Yes, and quick melee, we mean like the generic melee that most characters have. Reinhardt, we're talking about today, doesn't have one because he has his own hammer he uses. But most characters have a melee. It's pretty universal, does the same amount of damage. And the way they're doing it is, most abilities aren't going to be interrupted by that. And it's just make it more transparent, I guess, more universal, consistent. maybe.
Right. It also makes it a lot easier for them to balance certain things because a lot of characters, specifically like Genji that I talked about, you're able to get a lot of effectiveness out of that quick melee and using that in quick succession with other abilities. So as we mentioned, there's obviously exceptions to this rule, and any quick movement abilities, i.e. Tracer's Blink, Genji's Swift Strike, and things like that, they can actually work without canceling your quick melee. And so basically, Genji's thing is you can actually Swift Strike and melee right at the end of your Swift Strike, but you are not able to Swift Strike and then immediately cancel animation and melee at the same time like you used to be able to do. So that's different.
Yeah, so a lot of this comes down to just playing a character and understanding fundamentally how it works and what things do obey those rules and which ones don't. And the game's still pretty young. I think Blizzard's let it go for a little while. Like, okay, yeah, you could kind of do that with Genji, or you could kind of do that. And we've seen them, fix some quickly, like the Reaper reload animation changes. Some of them they fix right away, and some of them, take more time.
Yeah, the quick scoping was a perfect example, I think, of that. Is they kind of let it go for a little while. You were able to Widowmaker and able to quick scope and unscope, and it gave you a pretty good advantage being able to do that. And then, pretty soon after things started coming up, they fixed that. In the same kind of way, just making it a lot more baseline, as we talked about. High-end players who are used to these things, they know these little tidbits and tricks. They're able to get so much more usefulness out of these abilities, and it makes it a lot harder for people who are just jumping into the game.
Right, and just to end that real quick, pretty much every ultimate ability should still allow you to cancel the quick melee.
Right. So now all your ultimates will, cancel all quick melee, and it'll allow you to obviously take precedence with your ultimate because they're so important.
Yeah, we're talking about the animation.
Right, just the animation.
The melee. So let's talk about Hanzo. He's got quite a bit of changes. So they pretty much address, where they feel that he is. They give us some comments about him, possibly being too strong. We talked about the changes with Hanzo. So the arrows are flying a lot faster now, and he's able to move a little bit faster while he's got his arrow, ready.
Right. So when you have the arrow actually pulled back and ready to
aiming.
fire, you used to move a lot slower. Now you're able to move faster, which is great, and his arrow speed's a lot more quicker as well. So they did say he's probably a little bit too strong right now, so we'll probably see some changes coming soon to that as well. But ultimately, the goal that they talked about is they want to make players feel like they have a little bit more control over their shots, and so that the skilled players can feel more consistent with him instead of feeling like they're kind of in a loss with him rather than playing someone like Widowmaker.
Yeah, I think overall Hanzo feels a lot better. I remember trying to hit Pharah's and Mercy's flying around midair. It was pretty difficult, Hanzo, especially at further distances, but now with that travel speed increase. And he still does move slower when he's aiming. It's just not as slow as it was before.
Right, which I feel like that is really good. I think that worked out really well, and I think that's probably going to stay. What we'll probably see change is maybe the speed might get adjusted. They also did make a quick change to, again, the projectile size. So if you've been following that, originally his projectile size was really large, and in previous changes they actually reduced the size of his projectile size, but they actually had some unintended consequences, as we talked about on the last show, and they actually reverted that change, and now again on the PTR, if you're on the PTR, his projectile size is about 33% smaller now. So hopefully they've fixed any unintended consequences of that, but it should feel much better. The arrows will be much faster, but it'll still be a lot harder to aim with his arrows.
Yeah, so that's we'll find out if it really does bring Hanzo up enough to be played competitively. I mean, he looks all right. I mean, there's potential there.
Yeah, there's definitely potential, and I think obviously if you're playing the PTR, it's obvious to see that a lot more people are playing Hanzo, and they're having a lot of fun with it. And I think
a lot of golden bows because you don't really waste your currency in a PTR to spend all your points.
Definitely. So definitely looking forward to that. We'll see what happens with Hanzo. Hopefully he will be bumped up enough, and we'll see a lot of him in competitive. The last one to talk about mainly is Soldier 76. So a little bit changing with him. We've had so many changes with him in the past with his spread on his weapon, and that has actually been changed as well. So now the spread's going to start spreading a little bit earlier into firing, but it's actually going to recover a little bit more quickly now.
Right, so Blizzard was saying that 76 should improve his effectiveness while burst firing his weapon, and helps him get back to a more accurate state. And I think what they're trying to have the 76 kind of fulfill the role of very good at bursting and still be very effective at longer ranges, like be accurate at longer ranges, because he had pretty crazy spreads before. So hopefully that'll be toned down a little bit, and just like that burst fire. I mean, that that kind of feeling. I think so the rifle.
Yeah, they want him to be where he's not sniper range, but he's able to be good at a pretty good effective range, and they want him to really be, I think, the constant damage dealer to keep pumping damage out and able to really put the team on the back foot, but not be able to just take out the whole team on his own. So
yes, I think overall there'll be better changes. Time will tell. I mean, there's other changes or more changes or reverts of changes. Who knows? But we should probably be seeing these changes on live not too long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure when Season 2 starts up, we will see these changes get implemented. As to say, what might change from then till now, we'll see what happens.
And to remind listeners, I believe that's the 6th.
That is the 6th. So September 6th
right.
is when we're looking at for Season 2 to start, and I definitely cannot wait for that.
All right, so let's talk about Jeff Kaplan and the support place matches. So I think I talked about it a little bit in the beginning of Season 1, but Kappa just came out and was saying how some heroes were placed too low than other
Right.
heroes, and some heroes got placed too high. We're talking about the placement matches in Season 1, and I guess he mentioned like Mercy and Lucio were some the main culprits of this, where the placement matches weren't really going well for them.
Right, so as Kaplan came out and said, there were others, not only Mercio and Lucio, but the main ones that people had talked about was Mercy and Lucio because of the fact that they're the only support characters in Season 1 when this happened. So mainly a lot of people thought it was just the support. So there were others that were affected too, and some were placed way too low and some were being way too high. So they're definitely going to be fixing that for Season 2, and we look forward to seeing how that will shape up.
Yeah, and it did feel kind of weird because personally, I played a lot of Mercy, especially at the beginning of Season 1, and I won 9 of my placement matches, and I got put at 59, which I know a lot of it has to do with hidden MMR and everything, but I thought that was pretty low. I had a friend playing a soldier, and he was 71. Anyways, I ended up at around 70.
Right. So that's what I was just gonna say. It seems a little low to be at 59 when you ended up much higher at 69 pretty easily. I think you kind of stopped towards the end, like you said, you were at the highest spot that you could get any more competitive points at the end of the year. So it really didn't matter for you.
Yeah, I wish I could have played a lot more at the end of Season 1 there. Had some family visiting, had a lot of time spending with them, and I had a really good win rate. It's just I really didn't play that many games, and maybe like 50 games or something.
Right, so you moved up pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that could, I'm sure.
But I played a ton of Mercy, man. That's what happens.
Yeah,
you get suckered. I'm gonna stick to
Always
Zenyatta for now.
For everybody else, yeah. So we'll definitely look and see what's going to happen with that. I'm sure they will fix that for Season 2.
So we're pretty much talking about, I guess, how the stats of the heroes were balanced to kind of calculate, your effectiveness in battle and rank changes,
right? Stuff
like that. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, you would expect all these kind of things to get improved over the seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's just little things that they're going to have to work out, niches and stuff like that. We're going to see them change. So definitely looking forward to Season 2. And going right into that, we had a post that was sent specifically on the forum board to Jeff Kaplan, and Kaplan kind of came out and answered it. People asking, of course, for Season 2 to come even earlier. I know Kaplan specifically said that obviously the boat's kind of sailed at this point with Season 2 coming around. The time frame's kind of set, and it's not really realistic for it to happen any sooner. So obviously we're going to see it on September 6th as scheduled. But they were talking definitely about making changes for Season 2 to 3, the switch over. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, as seeing how quickly they turn over the seasons.
Yeah, so a lot of feedback Blizzard's getting from the player base is there's too long of a gap in between the seasons. They told us originally maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and we're looking at about 3-week gap between 1 and 2, which I would probably agree is a little too long. I think 2 weeks is like the sweet spot right there. You have 2.5 months on and then 2 weeks off.
Right. I think it really is compounded by the fact that this season was really short because we kind of started late in the season. And so I feel like a lot of people just kind of got their footing in the game, in competitive especially, and they were kind of, definitely waiting for Season 2 to come around. They kind of felt like Season 1 ended too quickly. I think 2 weeks is about good, like you said. I don't think 3 weeks is unreasonable. I think, it seems like Season 1 just ended to me, so... But we'll see. Obviously, quicker is always better in my book. But
yeah, especially if you have the PTR up in between, it kind of gives players an optional thing to participate in and get ready for the next season with all the changes. So I mean, I don't think it's a big deal, but I mean, people just really want to play competitive and they're excited about it. So I can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand it, but like you said, I think honestly on the other side of that coin, with PTR being up, especially with all the changes they've made quite a few changes. I think it's really good to give it time to kind of marinate and get people to play and give Blizzard some feedback on, those changes before they implement them. I mean, you'd feel really bad if they made a lot of changes and then like 2 weeks or a week around and then they released Season 2 and those changes completely broke things, and made certain characters overpowered and such. So inversely, it would feel really bad. So.
Yeah, but I think it's not as bad as some other games where if like some things are broken at the beginning of the season, it could really tragically, damage. But this game, the way it works is you have to play a certain amount of games to get to the top, and you have 2.5 months of time span, and you have rating, deterioration. You have a bunch of things in place that, I mean, you could have some imbalances throughout the season, and I think overall, as long as it was balanced properly, it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, definitely not as much as some, but any imbalance is obviously we would prefer not to be. But yeah, so definitely looking forward to Season 2. Hopefully, maybe Season 3 will be a little bit quicker, but we'll keep that in mind and see what happens then.
All right, so let's change gears and talk about the competitive scene. So we always talk about when new organizations get into the scene, and we love talking about that because it shows growth, right, for the esports scene. So. Let's first talk about how Liquid did pick up an additional player.
Yeah, so Liquid picked up a really popular Quake player, Rafa. So it's Shane Rafa Henderson. He's a pretty big Quake veteran. Anybody who's been in that scene or knows anything about that, I'm sure, knows the name. He's widely considered one of the most successful Quake players. So Liquid really rounding out their team. I know previously we talked about 2 others that they picked up recently. So definitely Liquid is looking really good with their team, and hopefully they'll do really well in the future.
Yeah, I think they were looking, for that special, player or a couple players, and hopefully they found him and they could show us what they're made of. Yeah, I was getting a little bit ahead of myself there, but now we could talk about Rise Nation and how they joined Overwatch.
Right, so new organization, Rise Nation, joins Overwatch, and they picked up former team Gecko. So Rise Nation is a former Call of Duty organization. So if you know anything about that or you're in that field, I'm sure Rise Nation's pretty big organization, and we're glad to have them in Overwatch.
Yeah, I mean, I never really followed the Call of Duty esports scene, really. I do see it's pretty popular. I've seen a good amount of viewership on that. But yeah, so Rise Nation, I don't know much about them, but a lot of people I guess know them from Call of Duty. And Gecko is a pretty well-known team. They've been competing, and we're going to talk about them a little bit in Overwatch Open. They are playing against the best teams in the world. So they definitely have potential there. You get a nice. I think it does affect the players when you get a new organization.
Yeah, but anytime big changes like that happens, it's obviously going to affect the team in a number of different ways. So
hopefully positive.
Yeah, hopefully positive for them, and we'll see them do really well, and we look forward to seeing them in the future. Definitely. Good luck, guys.
Right, so let's talk about the Overwatch World Cup polls and how they're now closed. So the last couple of shows we were talking about how, the special little thing Blizzard's going on at the BlizzCon, how they're not going to have like a formal tournament. They probably didn't really have the time or, planning to have a huge world tournament this year. But, I'm sure... next year at BlizzCon will be the first World Championship over there, and I'm sure it will be amazing. But they're just gonna have a fun little thing. No big prize pools, but
just bragging rights. They have a lot of chance to see our favorite streamers and favorite players get up on the stage and compete at BlizzCon. It's always gonna be fun. I'm sure I will have a blast watching that. But yeah, so the polls are actually closed now. You cannot vote. So if you didn't vote, shame on you. You should have got out and voted. And
we told you.
Closed. Yes, we told you. We reminded you. So those are closed, and obviously the final rosters will be coming pretty soon. So August 29th, which is Monday. If you're listening to this, you probably want to get out and check out what the final rosters are going to be. They're going to be announcing those.
Yeah, by the time you're listening to this, the rosters are probably released. So go check them out, see if the people you voted for are going to be at BlizzCon. You can read them on and see what other players are on the team. Because one of the most interesting things is obviously it's a per individual basis, right? So you're going to have people on teams of other people, which it's a smaller scene, so people know other people, but they're not usually on their team, right?
Right, exactly. So you got to pick, the players that are going to be in the teams, but you didn't get to see you didn't get to decide which team they're on or the rosters. Blizzard's going to decide that for us. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they match them up and what people are on what teams. So definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting either way. Can't wait.
Big names, definitely.
And the BlizzCon obviously is the first weekend usually of November.
Yeah,
give you a time frame when that's going down.
Yeah, can't wait for that. Definitely, we will keep you informed. Hopefully, when the rosters get released, we will let you know on that. Definitely. So, switching gears onto the Overwatch Open. So, it's biggest prize pool recently. It's a $3,000 prize pool, and so we got some changes going on. The the NA final qualifiers for the Group C and D. C is finally finished. So, Fnatic took out Liquid 2-0. And the EU Reunited took out Ninjas in Pajamas 2-0. They did a really good job there. If you want to check out a really good game, the Reunited Ninjas in Pajamas is a really good game. I caught that at the tail end as well. And we're still waiting on the D group to finish up. So we got Complexity got taken out by Rise Nation. So we were just talking about them. They did a great job, 2-0, taking them out. And as this is going on, we're still waiting for Method versus NRG, and they're currently playing to see what happens there.
Right, so all the groups have not been finished, playing out today. But so pretty much what we're going to have is the best 4 teams from North America and the 4 best from EU. And we'll have the regional finals, right, on September 25th to 29th?
Right, so the regional finals will pick up September 25th to 29th. So we're definitely looking forward to that and seeing who's gonna take the finals there, and looking forward to seeing that for sure. So EU final qualifier D did actually finish up a little bit earlier than NA, and LG took that 2-0 versus Dignitas. That was another really good game. Check it out if you're interested in seeing some really good plays.
And Overwatch Open, of course, is the biggest prize pool to date that we've seen, $300,000. The production's really good. I've already seen, even within just the progress of the beginning of the tournament till now, the casters are on base. They know, they know what they're doing. The visualizations, the whole, schematics, the whole, even everything from spectating. Seems like the quality of the content has definitely gone up quite a bit. And kudos to those guys. They're working really hard.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the better tournaments that we've seen put together, and so hats off to those guys doing a really good job there. And if you're looking for some really good esports, go check it out, Overwatch Open.
All right, so let's talk about a Reinhardt in our strategy character summary. Every week we usually pick one character, usually decided by the listeners, and today that's Reinhardt. So everyone knows Reinhardt. He's a German guy. He tanks. He's got a big shield. He swings a big hammer. Sometimes it's an axe, depending on the skin you have.
Right, so he's the big brute in the front lines, Reinhardt. He is a huge tank. He is 500 health total, but don't forget about his barrier field. He can put that out at any time. It has 2,000 health.
Right, so you see a lot of Reinhardt, especially certain maps. He's excels, but he's been pretty much a pretty much given a lot of games.
He's a standard pick for sure. I mean, obviously there's comps and situations where you might go with somebody else, but he's pretty much the standalone, standard pick for any situation.
He's like pretty much like the pinnacle tank. He's always going to give you some pretty good value and fulfill his role pretty well. So let's talk about his weapon. He has a rocket hammer. If you left click, right, if you primary attack, you swing it. It's a pretty big arch. I'm sure everyone's already seen this. I'm sure they've witnessed it firsthand.
Yeah, definitely don't want to get too close to that. It is a pretty big hammer, and he swings it really hard. It will take out multiple people. There's no ammo or reload. It's simply melee, and it does about 75 damage at a rate about 1 swing per second. And, of course, it does not headshot. But he doesn't need to headshot you. If you get close enough, he will just take you straight out.
Yeah, I mean, especially if people are clustered, especially if you get some sort of ultimate down, he's able to hit multiple people. Huge, area of effect in front of him, a big old arc, and 75 damage, much greater than your regular punch or regular, melee attack.
On most characters, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, it's more than double. It's pretty devastating. Obviously, your strategy against Reinhardt is pretty much don't go within the range of his hammer.
Right, exactly. So he is definitely, a big brute. He has that hammer. He doesn't have to reload it or anything, and he can do some really good damage up close. But his maneuverability is very inhibited because he's in that huge armor, and he's not able to move around a lot.
And he's old. He's like the oldest person in there, besides Ana. But he was the oldest, I think, before Ana.
Yeah, so yeah, he doesn't move around quite as easy and as spry as the young fellers on the teams, but you definitely don't want to get close to him. He does a lot of
damage. The primary attack swings his hammer. Alternate attack, he does have alternate attack. It's his shield. It's kind of neat. You go into like a third-person view. Gives you a nice bird's-eye view of the what's in front of you and stuff. A big old shield. It's a blue. If it's friendly, it's red. All the shields operate that way. The shield does recharge if you don't have it out, right?
Right. So if it's not deployed, it will recharge. It has, like we said before, it's a 2,000 shield that you can put up, and it recharges at about 225 health per second when not out. Obviously, if you have it out, it's not recharging. And so you're able to really put that out and really guard your friends and even close off whole areas with that shield. It's pretty big.
Yeah, and for newcomers, the biggest mistake I see is they don't realize they can shoot through the shield. I mean, most of our listeners probably already know that, but I can't tell you, how many times when I first started playing the game, people don't realize, you can shoot through the shield if it's a friendly shield.
Right, exactly.
Behind,
so if Reinhardt's out front of you, you can still do damage. You can still be up there right in front of his shield and doing damage. You don't have to cross past his shield and be vulnerable. So definitely don't do that.
Right, so let's talk about charge. It's on the shift by default on the PC. It has a 10-second cooldown. It does quite a bit of damage. It'll do a 50 damage initially on impact, and that's whether you're pinned or not. And then if you get pinned, that means you end up against a wall. It does, about 300 damage, so a lot of characters will just outright die to this.
Yeah, it's very devastating. Good Reinhardts, they know how to get this charge off, and they can do it really unsuspectingly and catch you off guard. If you're not paying attention to them, you're fighting somebody else. That 300 damage is going to go a long ways. The initial hit's 50, 300 for the pins. It's 350 total damage. It's going to take out most characters in one swipe with that.
And it's a very, very far distance, right? A lot of times you will use this just for maneuverability because you do move quite a bit faster than you normally do. So, for example, like a May Blizzards or something. But even if you just spawn, you can use shift. It's a 10-second cooldown, so it'll be up pretty soon. And you do have some maneuverability left and right. It's very slight, but you are able to aim it to some degree. And yeah.
Right, and the further you go, you have a little bit more control. Obviously, if it's really close to the distance you're going between your charge, start and end, you don't have much control over it. But yeah, you're able to aim it a little bit and maneuver around. And like you said, it's kind of far. So if you're new to Reinhardt and you're trying it out, just keep in mind, you can go off the map with this ability, and that can be pretty devastating.
Yeah, just make sure something concrete like a wall is going to be there to stop you.
Yeah, it's probably the best way for the beginners.
So let's talk about the Fire Strike. It's going to be default on the E on the PC. It has a 6-second cooldown, relatively short. The cast time, which is like a little animation, it's a quarter of a second. We saw this in action in the newest short with the Bastion. Really cool Fire Strike animation. It was pretty amazing, actually. Took out a bunch of little Bastions. It does quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, it's about 1,000 damage per hit, and it can strike through multiple heroes in a straight line. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it does 1,000 damage.
Yeah, it doesn't do 1,000 damage. It's a mistake there, I guess. But it does a lot of damage.
It's probably 100.
It's about 100, yeah.
Yeah, 100 sounds right. 100 damage. And yeah, it does go through multiple
heroes
enemies.
In a straight line,
yeah,
so you can line people up, like I said, with his Earth Shatter ultimate, which we're talking about next. You can use that and get people, in position. You can line them up and use that, or if they're just in a close area, all grouped together, you can take them out.
Yeah, it's not like a bullet, so it behaves kind of like a Symmetra right-click energy ball. It's like an energy weapon, so there's some benefits of that. Obviously, it goes through like a Winston shield or like another Reinhardt shield, for example.
Right, and it does have some travel time as well, so.
Yeah, it's slow moving, a little slow moving, but
yeah,
when you line them up perfectly down the corridors or whatever,
feels so awesome to get that Fire Strike off and
it
hit
gives you
people.
really good ultimate charge. Even if you're like the spawn room's right there and they're not gonna die, but you hitting people with Fire Strike is a good ult charge in.
Yeah, and it's his one ability that he's really able to kind of poke with, instead of having to go full force and charge into a group and kind of probably get in over your head. You're able to keep up that poke and keep up some damage and kind of really keep the team on the defensive.
Yeah, no, that's the only projectile you have, right? I mean, other than your ultimate, but your ultimate's kind of a close quarters ability as well. So it's the only thing you have,
It's a pretty big deal. You don't want to waste lightly, for sure.
Right, so let's talk about Earth Shatter. It's his ultimate. It's about a half a second cast time, so it's just a little bit delay on activation. He goes hammer down. It does a little bit of damage. It's a huge cone effect, and it will penetrate like payloads and stuff like that. And it won't go through like a Reinhardt shield, but you have to have to be aware. I mean, of things like that, because I've seen plenty of wasted. But if there is like a Winston shield, it won't go through the shield, but it just shatters Earth. Huge cone in front of him. It's a lot further than a lot of people think as well.
Yeah, and it almost you got to be careful with that because I don't know if it's server issue or whatnot, but I almost seem like a lot of times I'll hear the hammer down come, and there's almost like there is a delay in when the ability fires. But if you walk into it, you can still get hit with the ability too. So kind of got to be careful with that.
And of course, if
watch
you're
out.
hit by it, you get stunned for 2.5 seconds. We've all seen experiences. You take a little tiger snooze on the ground.
Yeah, 2.5 seconds. It may sound like a short time, but in Overwatch, it is a lifetime. I can tell you how many times I've been hit with this ability, and it's pretty much game over.
Yeah, so pretty much it's usually pretty obvious if you haven't seen an enemy Reinhardt ultimate in a while. You don't want to stand in front of him. Obviously he's trying to get a good amount of value out of it. He's trying to hit multiple people down. Of course, him swinging his huge hammer. A lot of times he's able to catch a lot of people in there. If he gets the angle right on his fire strike, he's able to just line him up, fire strike, hit multiple people that are laying on the ground, and easy pin on his charge because they're just standing still.
Yeah, you can hit multiple people with the charge as well, and pin somebody down and really make a huge dent in the team and just take a whole team fight if you do it right. So.
Right, so that's his whole kit. So let's talk a little bit about using his whole kit together, playing to his strengths. We talked a little bit about being in close range.
Yeah, he really is. It's one of those things like we always talk about playing to your strengths. He's a close quarters kind of tank. He doesn't move around very easily unless you're using your charge, and that's really risky in a lot of situations if you're just charging into a whole team and such. So you want to play it really close. Close quarters are awesome because you can get multiple people with your left click, and you want to make sure that you keep your enemies in front of you. You can keep your shield between you guys. If they get behind you, especially a McCree or something, they can stun you and whatnot, make you real vulnerable.
Right, and so it's important to note that, when you have your shield out, you can spin, instantaneous 360 degrees, and there is actually a little bit of verticality to the shield. If you look up, he does move it slightly up. So you have, you can be very precise with your shield. There's no, certain amount of speed you could turn the shield by or something like that. But, yeah, you want to, be cautious of where your players are at, with your team, because you single-handedly aren't doing a ton of work, but you combine with other people's where you get a lot of value. And obviously the mistake a lot of Reinhardts make off the bat is charging into a group. Obviously it's ideal for you to be with your team and then behind your shield, and then get your fraggers behind you, right? Your McCrees or your 76s.
Yeah, it's one of those things that goes hand in hand, just like any kind of other support situation where, you find a lot of supporters who are not focused on actually supporting. They want to be a part of the action and such. You got to remember, you are a tank, Don't be limited by that. Don't be afraid to do damage and take people out when you can, but you got to always keep in mind your team. If you're dead as your tank, you're not helping your team out at all. You're making them super vulnerable. They're short a tank. If the other team has an enemy Reinhardt, they can push into the team really hard. You want to stay alive, keep your team alive, always at all costs. Think about your team first.
Yeah, sometimes it is good to charge an enemy team. For example, if you're timing with a break it down, or if it's Zenyatta ulted on your team and he's coming in with you. But generally, coordination works a lot. Obviously, if you have bastions on your team or something like that are very vulnerable, combining yourself, your abilities with his abilities, then all of a sudden you're pretty strong force.
Right, definitely. So always communication above all else. Think about your team before, and just be careful and always think twice when you're charging into an enemy team for sure.
Right, so let's talk about positioning and choke points and how to...
This is one of the things that we talk about with most characters, and I mean every character obviously is going to excel in certain areas, but I think we can all agree that choke points are where most fights are taken. So we're always talking about choke points and such, but positioning, especially with Reinhardt, is very important. Where you're placing your shield, what your position is between your enemy and your allies and such, and making sure that you're doing to the best of your ability to protect your allies.
And probably the most popular mistake I see people do with Reinhardt, and this is even the higher levels, a lot of Reinhardts have their shield out, and there's no reason for them to be standing there with the shield out. So they're depleting their shield, and there's no gain, right? So you're never going to be out in the open with your shield out for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things we all see quite often with Reinhardt's. I think we get all, caught up in using his shield as often as possible. What we got to remember is, it's 2,000 health. It's quite a bit, but with, multiple enemies attacking me, it can go down pretty quickly, and that is really your major defense. When you don't have that down, then the enemy team knows that's their chance to strike. So you got to make sure that you're not just wasting that. If you're not benefiting from having it out, you definitely should not just have it out. Number one, you're depleting the shield, and that has to recharge. And number two, you're just giving ult charge to the other team.
Well, they're not getting ult hitting the shield.
Well, yeah, not hitting the shield, but either way, just having it up, once they take it down, then they can...
It gives them potential, yeah. The thing is... you need to a lot of times you're having a battle with the enemy Reinhardt, and a lot of times it's a burst damage race, right? And whose shield goes down first, because that's going to force that team to move, to move their hand first.
Exactly.
And another thing to point out is, if you are Reinhardt, you're paying a lot of attention to the enemy Reinhardt, not just the shield. And obviously, we haven't mentioned it, but the shield does have visual effects letting you know about the charge. There starts cracking, and so you know exactly kind of where it is.
Reinhardt usually gives you a cue to your teammates as well. The shield's going down.
Yeah, even more importantly, the enemy, Reinhardt, you'll see the cracks come, and more cracks obviously means it's more and more depleted. But yeah, so pretty much if you're playing Reinhardt, if you're pushing point A, you don't just kind of stand there with the shield, right? When you go out in the open with your shield, it's because you're pushing, you're making an advance, and your team is supposed to be with you, obviously, hopefully. They're competent.
You want to make sure that you just have it up to protect your allies. I mean, honestly, unless you're being attacked or your allies are being attacked, your shield does not really need to be out. Again, you can fire strike if you don't have it up. You can do damage with your left click and such. You just don't want to just be standing out there constantly having your shield out for no reason.
Right, so let's talk about using the barrier field. We talked a little bit about that and how important communication is.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, but one other thing that we didn't mention was there are obviously abilities that can penetrate, and that's important to know. So, Symmetra's ability can go through and hit the Reinhardt. It won't actually get broken by the shield as well. Her turrets don't. They'll actually hit the shield, and they'll actually do damage to the shield. Again, they don't generate alt charge.
Yeah, her alternate fire with the big ball moving.
Yeah, her alt fire will actually go straight through and do damage to Reinhardt, so it's important to be careful with that.
Yeah, like a Winston's Tesla cannon.
Winston Tesla cannon is great. I always love using Winston against Reinhardt's because they're really good at taking them down. And then you have another fire strike, of course, from alternate Reinhardt can go through as well, and Flashbang is probably the really big one that we want to talk about. McCree, very devastating in a situation against Reinhardt if he can get that shield down.
Yeah, so Flashbang doesn't penetrate the shield, obviously, but I'm sure most of you are aware that Flashbang, you just throw it right above the Reinhardt. It's going to stun him. He used to be able to right click and do quite a bit of damage to Reinhardt within that short stun. That's been toned down a little bit, so you're not going to really get globaled instantly, but if he has some, backup, if he...
Yeah, I mean, I love that as well. Like, I mean, the alternate fire is back a little bit with McCree. You can do some pretty good damage with it. Obviously, if you pair it with your roll, you can do a lot of damage. Probably not going to take him out all by yourself, but you can definitely, with a little bit of help from another person, you can definitely take him
so
down.
If you see a McCree coming up to you, pretty much expect that flashbang. But, I mean, you could obviously, a couple swings is going to demolish his health bar. Obviously, you could pin him down, charge him. And obviously, we haven't talked about it, but Reinhardt's really good against stationary targets, even, bastions or turrets and stuff, because his fire strike does a ton of damage, and him being able to pin people is very easy when they're stationary.
Exactly. So he's really good against stationary targets. He's just, like we said, he's a well-rounded tank. He can do a lot and just really helps out his team all over the board. Next to talk about really is, again, his charge and how to use that as well.
Right, so my favorite thing with him is getting a surprise charge, and usually that means using some sort of vertical advantage, right? So being on the rooftops and stuff, just coming out of a charge, and you don't even have to pin an individual necessarily to do some good value. He kind of has this bowling ball effect where if you don't hit him perfectly on, he will disperse the people he hits. So a lot of times you'll see like Reinhardt pin somebody, but he'll hit additional people. He won't pin additional people, but he'll knock them out of the way. And it's a pretty significant knockback. You can see them, you get, environmental deaths that way, falling into pits or off the map entirely.
Yeah, it can really catch a team off guard, definitely using that charge. So definitely using verticality, using that high ground is always good. We talk about that a lot, and it applies as well to Reinhardt. Not so much with his other abilities. Obviously, you have to be up close and personal with Reinhardt if you want to do damage, but you can always look for ways to use that charge and catch teams off guard.
Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about Fire Strike already. Obviously good against stationary targets or even targets that just don't have that much mobility.
It's good for poke, keeping up that attack and just keeping the enemy team on the back foot and really just supplying a steady amount of damage, and helps obviously build up your Earth Shatter for your ultimate. So it's definitely good ability to just use pretty much off cooldown if you can use it.
Yeah, the only concern I have that comes to mind right away is enemy Zarya's. They could kind of feed off of your Fire Strike because it does move so slow, and she's able to just shield herself or an ally, and she'll get instant 50% charge. And Yeah, just watch out for that.
Yeah, I mean, Zarya is really, really good against Reinhardt, especially with that shield of hers. And another thing to keep in mind, it's probably not going to be that effective, but you can also have that Fire Strike reflected by Genji as well.
Right, and so we talked a little bit about his ultimate. He has a pretty impactful ultimate. Trend we see is, tanks and healers, they typically do have very impactful ultimates, especially on the tank side, ones that combine well with other heroes. But pretty much he just lays out, all the people in front of him. Like I said, it's a pretty far range and a huge cone in front of him. And, I mean, just Reinhardt by himself could do tons of damage because he has AoE abilities. Even his Fire Strike, even though it's a straight line, you could easily hit 2-3 people laying down with that Fire Strike, and then you get the charge after that. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah, and as well as just his regular left click. I mean, if there's 3 people kind of mopped up real close, you can just left click a couple times and just take them out with that Fire Strike and the charge as well. It's really devastating. So definitely always keep in mind if you're going up against a Reinhardt that he could have that Earth Shatter, and it's pretty obvious when he puts down his shield, he's usually either using his hammer, or he's Earth Shattering, or he's Fire Striking. So kind of just keep in mind when he puts his shield down, you should probably be wary.
Yeah, and he is a tank, but he's able to do some decent damage, especially just holding left click down and W. I'm thinking like Zarya ultimates, a Blizzard ultimate. I mean, whenever you could cluster the enemies together, the fact that he could hit 2, 3, 4 people with his left click, I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of damage per second.
Yeah, I mean, it does really good damage. And keep in mind, I mean, again, it's not it's a melee ability, so you don't have to reload. There's no downtime. You could just constantly swing that hammer.
Right, and the only thing I could think of that we haven't really talked about is, he is kind of vulnerable to flanking, right, because he can only shield from one direction. So that's another reason to be back with your team. Obviously, the further up and away you are from your team, the easier it is to be flanked.
Yeah, communication, of course, always key with your team. If you're getting attacked by a flanker, or you see the flankers moving in, McCree, you see him moving in, you could probably guess that he's not alone or that he's expecting help and such. And really his downfall as Reinhardt as a tank is being attacked in two different directions. So that's really how you counter Reinhardt really well. If you can get him out in the open a little bit and you can attack him from both ways, he can only choose one position to keep his shield up, and so he's really vulnerable. If you get a Genji coming in on one direction and then McCree comes from behind, he flashbangs, you can take him out really easily. So definitely you want to keep a sharp eye on the enemy team and see where their flankers are at and where they're going.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about how Reinhardt could kind of be a whole team saver with the shield, right? It just could counter ultimates. Obviously, Deadeye is an obvious
Diva,
one.
You can take
Diva.
Take the brunt of that.
You could save it. You could save 2 different ways. I mean, the smart Reinhardt would just throw his shield up with the Diva. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to YOLO, you just charge the Diva mech. And you're going to sacrifice yourself, but you can displace that ultimate further away from your team. But of course, you could just put your shield up. But maybe your shield's down.
Well, and not only that, it depends on which side of your shield your teammate's on. If you have a lot of flankers out around, in front of your shield, they're pretty much vulnerable. So,
yeah. So I mean, but there's a lot of ultimates, obviously, that you could protect. Obviously, the Mei Blizzard's a little bit more devastating because it can go through your shield. It's got a bigger radius now. We don't see that much Mei, but you want to watch out for her. Yeah,
hopefully we'll be seeing more of her as well. So that recent change, you got to watch out for that. It will go through the shield. It's really good against pretty much any other ult. I mean, it's good against Zarya's ult. You do got to keep in mind, Junkrat's ult can go through it as well. So
yeah, a lot of times Zarya will waste an ult just because the whole team could be in there, but if Reinhardt has a 2,000 shield
in front,
you want to make sure you're in front, and usually you stay in front. When you get sucked in, you have Pharah, her ult. If you're really close to Pharah, you can just kill herself because the damage you'll do to her.
Exactly. Yeah, if she gets too close to the shield, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 76 ult. I mean,
Reaper
your typical
ults,
Junkrat ult. Obviously, you got to be really quick with the swing on the tire. You got to be really quick to be able to turn around.
Yeah, so hopefully your flankers will get that for you, but you can't always rely on the team. So
yeah, we don't all have pro teammates on our team, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't we all wish him? But anything else I think we missed with Reinhardt?
I think that's about it for Reinhardt. I think we'll continue our trend with our next hero coverage. There's probably a good handful of heroes we haven't done yet. And of course, our listeners could let us know what they want, and whatever's the most popular vote, we'll do them next week.
All right, so write us in a message, and hopefully we'll be covering your hero next. I think that's going to do it all for this hero and for this show. Thank you guys for listening. See you next week, and
Yeah, so this show is brought to you by Two Moon Studios, and you can contact us with that hero request or just any comments or feedback. We thank you to all the people who have taken the time to do that. We love to hear from you. We always reply back, and that email would be a heroeswelcomepodcast@gmail.com, and we're at Twitter at Two Moon Studios, and those will both be in the show notes or description or however you're listening to this podcast.
And I think that's going to do it. Thanks again. Till next time, guys.
Till next time.